The police lifted a woman's skirt for entertainment, not expecting that. Lucy stepped out of the Starbucks with her usual elegant demeanor. The neat white dress hugged her slender figure, and her sophisticated black handbag accentuated her graceful appearance. She had just met a few close friends after a long day at work, and a faint smile lingered on her lips. However, her joy quickly faded as two men in police uniforms approached. One was Samuel, a middle-aged man with a tall, imposing build and cold, piercing eyes. The other, Lewis, was a younger colleague with a stern expression, though a hint of hesitation was evident on his face. "Good evening, ma'am," Samuel began, his tone indifferent. "We've received information about a recent theft nearby. Would you mind letting us inspect your bag?" Lucy froze for a moment but maintained her composure. "A theft? I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about that. I was just meeting friends at the Starbucks over there. It has nothing to do with me." Samuel raised an eyebrow, his cold gaze sweeping over Lucy from head to toe. "This is standard procedure. You don't have the right to refuse." Annoyance simmered in Lucy, but she tried to keep her voice calm. "I understand that this is your job, but you can't inconvenience me based solely on appearances or groundless suspicion. If necessary, I'm willing to go to the police station to clear this up. You think I need your permission?" Samuel sneered, a mocking smile flashing across his face. Without waiting for her reaction, he grabbed her handbag and started rummaging through it. "You have no right to do that," Lucy exclaimed, trying to snatch her bag back, but her strength was no match for Samuel. Lewis, standing nearby, looked like he was about to intervene but stopped when Samuel shot him a warning glare. "Stay quiet and don't move," Samuel barked, drawing the attention of several passers-by. Some merely glanced and walked on, but others stopped to watch, curious about the scene unfolding before them. Lucy felt anger welling up inside her. She turned to Lewis, hoping the younger officer would help her. "You know this is wrong. Why aren't you saying anything?" Lewis averted his eyes, unable to meet hers. I'm just following protocol." Samuel tossed the bag back to Lucy, his tone icy. "There's nothing in here. But we still need to check further. Stay where you are." Lucy took a step back, her voice wary. "What are you planning to do?" "We need to check if you're hiding any suspicious items," Samuel said. Without waiting for her consent, he crouched down and began to lift her dress in front of the onlookers. "No. You can't do this," Lucy shouted, trying to hold her dress down, but Samuel was stronger, pulling it up past her knees. A murmur spread through the small crowd. An elderly woman named Marta, passing by, whispered to her companion, "My goodness, how shameful. What's the world coming to?" The man next to Marta shrugged. "She looks wealthy. Who knows what she's involved in?" Lucy's face burned with humiliation and fury. She slapped Samuel's hand away and yelled, "Stop it. You're humiliating me. I'll sue you for this abuse of power." Samuel laughed coldly. "You think suing me will accomplish anything? I'm just doing my job." Lewis stood to the side, the conflict on his face clear. "Samuel, maybe that's enough," he said quietly, as if reluctant to be heard. "Shut up," Samuel snapped. "I know what I'm doing." Lucy took a deep breath, struggling to regain her composure. "You're violating my personal rights. I demand that you stop immediately." A middle-aged man named Pedro, dressed in a neat suit, shook his head as he watched from nearby. "Cops are terrifying. They can do whatever they want without accountability," he muttered to his companion. Though Pedro spoke softly, his words reached Lucy's ears, deepening her sense of isolation. The onlookers merely stared and whispered, but no one stepped forward to stop or help her. "Enough, Samuel," Lewis finally snapped. He stepped forward and grabbed Samuel's arm. "Stop this. You're going too far." Samuel turned to him, locking eyes with a menacing glare. Have you forgotten I'm your superior? Watch yourself, or I'll make sure you lose your job. Louis froze, anxiety flashing in his eyes. Eventually, he let go and stepped back, allowing Samuel to continue. Time seemed to stand still for Lucy. Humiliation and rage surged through her, but she knew there was little she could do in that moment. I won't let this go, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. You'll pay for this. Samuel shrugged, a cold smile on his lips. Go ahead, girl. I'll be waiting. Lucy walked away through the crowded street, her heart heavy with shame and resentment. Her dress had been pulled up in front of everyone, and their gazes felt like needles piercing her soul. No one intervened. No one stood up for her. She had screamed, resisted, but all it brought her were murmurs of gossip and indifferent stares. Her pace quickened as she distanced herself from the scene, but the feeling of helplessness lingered in her mind. She clutched the straps of her handbag tightly, as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Lucy's face burned, not just with embarrassment but with a fury that refused to subside. Samuel, that cop, had turned her peaceful evening into a nightmare. Meanwhile, Samuel and Louis returned to their patrol car. Samuel got into the driver's seat, chuckling smugly. That girl will remember me for the rest of her life, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Louis sat in silence, guilt weighing heavily on him. Samuel, don't you think you went too far? He finally asked, his tone hesitant. Too far? Samuel smirked. I'm just doing my job. Do you think criminals just sit around waiting to be caught? If you want to survive in this line of work, Louis, you need to know how to use your authority. Louis didn't reply. He couldn't accept how Samuel justified his actions. But he also didn't have the courage to stand up to his overbearing colleague. He knew Samuel had strong connections with their superiors, and any resistance could cost him his job. In her small apartment, Lucy stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair disheveled after the struggle. Samuel's insults still echoed in her mind, making her tremble with anger. She couldn't understand how a man could act that way without anyone stopping him. She called her best friend, Helen, and recounted everything in tears. He humiliated me, Helen. Right in the middle of the street, in front of so many people. No one helped me, no one did anything. Helen, a strong and compassionate woman, nearly shouted over the phone. This is unbelievable. Lucy, you have to report this. He cannot get away with it. Lucy took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I know, but who's going to believe me? He's a police officer, and I'm just a regular citizen. Don't worry, Helen said firmly. You're not alone. I'll help you. Meanwhile, at another street corner, Samuel continued his patrol. A young woman named Isabel was waiting for her bus. Samuel approached her, his cold gaze predatory. Good evening, ma'am. We've received information about a theft nearby. Would you mind letting us inspect your bag? I'm sorry, but Isabel began, her voice trailing off. Before she could finish, Samuel stepped closer, his eyes filled with intimidation. Raise your hands, he ordered. When Isabel hesitated, he reached out, grabbed her shoulder, and tugged at her shirt, exposing part of her chest. The action startled Isabel, and she backed away in fear, but Samuel didn't stop. He rummaged through her bag roughly, causing her personal belongings to spill onto the ground. Louis, standing nearby, felt his chest tighten. He knew he couldn't keep ignoring what was happening. But as he opened his mouth to speak, Samuel turned to him, his icy glare a clear warning. Got something to say, Louis? No, nothing, Louis stammered, lowering his gaze. He clenched his fists at his sides, struggling to contain his anger. He told himself he needed to act, but the fear of losing his job and retaliation always held him back. That evening, Lucy sat at her desk with a notebook and pen. She wrote down every detail of the incident, every word, every action Samuel had taken. She knew she needed to stay calm and prepare a clear plan. Tears fell onto the page, but instead of letting her pain overwhelm her, she turned it into determination. Helen sent her a text message with a link to a women's rights advocacy organization. "Contact them," Helen wrote. "They can help you." Lucy looked at the message, a flicker of hope lighting up in her heart. She didn't want to cry anymore. She knew she couldn't let Samuel keep hurting others. The next day, Lucy woke up after a restless night. Her mind was weighed down by the images and words of Samuel replaying over and over. But today, she had made up her mind. She wouldn't stay silent. She had spent the night writing a detailed report and preparing for what lay ahead. Lucy dressed in modest, simple clothing, but her eyes shone with determination. On her way to the police station to file her complaint, she stopped by her usual Starbucks. Helen was already waiting, her face full of worry but also unwavering support. "Lucy, are you okay?" Helen asked as soon as she saw her walk in. Lucy nodded and placed her bag on the table. "I'm okay. I've finished my complaint. I'm submitting it today." "You're incredibly brave," Helen said, her eyes full of encouragement. "I've been digging a bit. That Samuel guy, this isn't the first time he's done something like this. There are rumors he frequently abuses his authority, but no one's dared to report him." Lucy sighed. "That's what makes me so angry. He thinks he can get away with everything just because he wears a police uniform. But this time, I won't let it slide." Helen took her hand, offering strength. "Exactly. If you need me, I'll testify. I wasn't there, but I'll support you in any way I can." Lucy smiled, feeling a small sense of relief for the first time since the incident. But as she left the Starbucks and stepped into the police station, her confidence was put to the test. The station's large lobby was crowded and noisy. Lucy felt out of place amidst the hustle and bustle. A receptionist, a woman with short hair, glanced at her from behind the desk. "What do you need?" she asked curtly. "I want to file a complaint," Lucy said, her voice steady. "It's about a case of misconduct by an officer named Samuel." The receptionist paused briefly, her expression flickering with something unreadable. "Wait here," she said before disappearing behind a door leading to the officer's workspace. As Lucy waited, she scanned the room. A few officers passed by, casting curious glances in her direction. She ignored them. But it wasn't long before the door opened, and the person standing before her was none other than Samuel. Lucy froze, her heart skipping a beat. Samuel walked toward her, a smug smile on his face that made her stomach churn. "Lucy, you really came here to file a complaint?" "Bold of you," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "I have every right to do this," Lucy replied, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "You can't stop me." Samuel laughed, the arrogant sound she had come to despise. "Do you think your complaint will go anywhere? This is the police station, Lucy. I'm part of this system." Lucy stared at him, her eyes filled with fury. "I won't let you continue abusing your power. If this system isn't just, I'll go further. I won't stop." Samuel shrugged, feigning indifference. "Good luck, girl." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lucy standing there, anger and helplessness swelling in her chest. Meanwhile, Lewis sat in his office, his heart heavy. He had witnessed enough of Samuel's behavior to know his colleague was on the wrong path. But the fear of retaliation and losing his job kept him frozen. Lewis recalled Lucy's pained expression from the previous day. He couldn't shake the guilt that consumed him every time he thought about his silence. "Lewis," the voice of a colleague named Raoul interrupted his thoughts. "Are you okay? You look tense." Lewis forced a smile, but it didn't come naturally. "I'm fine. Just, some things at work." Raoul, a seasoned police officer, looked at him with a sympathetic expression. "I've heard about Samuel. I know it's not easy working with him. But Louis, sometimes staying silent isn't the best option. If you see something wrong, you should do what's right." Louis nodded, but his heart remained conflicted. Doing the right thing wasn't as simple as Raoul made it sound. Samuel wasn't just a colleague, he held power in their team. Reporting him would mean risking Louis's entire career. That evening, Lucy returned home, exhausted. She recounted everything to Alexander, her husband and her greatest emotional support. "He threatened me right there in the police station," Lucy said, her voice trembling with anger. "He thinks this system will protect him forever." Alexander listened, his face growing tense. "This won't end like this, Lucy. I'll help you. We'll find a way to make Samuel accountable." Lucy looked into Alexander's determined eyes, feeling a surge of strength. "I know it won't be easy, but I can't stay silent." Alexander nodded. "We'll fight this. He won't get away with it forever." The next morning, Lucy woke up feeling heavy-hearted. She had tried to stay calm the night before, but the haunting memory of her encounter with Samuel at the police station clung to her. Alexander had reassured her and promised to stand by her, but Lucy knew this battle would be long and arduous. After breakfast, Alexander left for work. Lucy spent most of the morning making phone calls, searching for information, and reaching out to support organizations. Every call felt like a small step forward, but her resolve never wavered. Meanwhile, Samuel carried on with his work as if nothing had happened. That morning, he and Louis were assigned to patrol another busy area of the city. Louis, burdened by his growing guilt, felt increasingly uneasy about working alongside Samuel. While passing through a small park, Samuel noticed a woman sitting on a bench, looking anxious. She was Clara, a housewife who had just dropped her children off at school and was resting before heading to the market. Samuel approached her with an air of arrogance, Louis trailing behind him. "Good morning. We've received reports of suspicious activity in the area. May I see your identification?" Samuel asked coldly. Clara looked up, startled by the unexpected question. "I don't have my ID with me. I'm just taking a short break before running errands." Samuel narrowed his eyes, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "No ID. You know that's against the law, right? Who knows if you're someone suspicious?" Clara shook her head, her expression confused. "I'm just a mother, nothing more. I haven't done anything wrong." Samuel didn't let her explain further. He grabbed the bag Clara had placed beside her, tugged at her shirt roughly, and rummaged through it in a vulgar manner. Personal items spilled onto the ground, including a family photo. Clara hurriedly bent down to pick up her belongings, but Samuel shoved her aside, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Louis stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. He knew full well that Samuel was abusing his power, but every time he tried to speak up, Samuel's threatening glare silenced him. Louis felt like a coward, powerless in the very job he had once been proud of. When Samuel finished searching and found nothing suspicious, he tossed the bag back onto the bench and said indifferently, "There's nothing here. Next time, carry your ID." Clara clutched her bag tightly, tears streaming down her face. She murmured, her voice trembling, "You have no right to treat me like this." Samuel simply shrugged and turned away, leaving Clara humiliated. A few passers-by had stopped to watch the incident, but no one dared to intervene. The murmurs began again. "It's him again," a man named Ramon whispered to his friend. "That cop is notorious for abusing his authority. It's terrifying. But what can we do? Stand up to the police?" "That's just asking for trouble," his friend replied, his tone resigned. Louis followed Samuel, but inside, he felt like a fire was raging. He couldn't go on like this. What Samuel had done to Lucy, and now Clara, had crossed every line a police officer should never cross. But Louis also knew that one misstep could end his career. That afternoon, Lucy received a call from Helen. "Lucy, I have important news," Helen said, her voice excited. "I just spoke to someone I know at a women's rights organization. They said if you need legal support, they're ready to help." Lucy felt a glimmer of light in the darkness. "Thank you, Helen. I really need this help." "I've sent you their contact information via email," Helen added. "Don't hesitate, call them right away. You're not alone." Lucy didn't wait. She immediately called the organization, briefly explaining her case and requesting legal advice. A staff member named Rose answered, her voice gentle but firm. "We've received similar cases involving police misconduct," Rose said. "Ms. Lucy, we're deeply sorry for what you've been through. Please send us all the information and documentation you have. We'll work with you to ensure your rights are protected." Lucy felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she no longer felt alone in this fight. But she also knew that Samuel wouldn't give up easily. He had already shown his disdain for her, and that only strengthened her determination. That evening, when Alexander returned home, Lucy recounted the day's developments. He listened intently and then nodded. "We're on the right path. But you need to prepare yourself, Lucy. This won't be easy." "I know," she said, her eyes resolute. "But I won't back down. I'm doing this not just for myself but for people like Clara, those who have been humiliated by him but are too afraid to speak out." Alexander gently squeezed her hand. "I'll help you." Alexander wasted no time taking action. He knew that relying solely on Lucy's complaint would likely result in the case being ignored or swept under the rug. Samuel wasn't just any ordinary cop, he was someone who had grown accustomed to abusing his power without facing consequences. To bring him to justice, Alexander needed to find other victims. In his study, Alexander sat in front of his computer, scrolling through forums and social media. He typed in keywords like police abuse in New York City and humiliated by police. It didn't take long for him to uncover stories from people who had experienced similar situations. While none specifically mentioned Samuel by name, the descriptions of arrogant, violent, and abusive police behavior made Alexander confident that Samuel had done this before. Lucy walked into the room, carrying a cup of coffee. "Have you found anything?" she asked, her voice a mix of worry and hope. "I think I've got a lead," Alexander replied, his eyes still glued to the screen. "A few people have shared their stories. I'll try to reach out to them." Lucy sat down beside him and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Alexander. I don't know what I'd do without you." Alexander smiled and squeezed her hand. "We're in this together, Lucy. Not just for you, but for everyone else. Samuel needs to be held accountable." Alexander spent the entire day combing through forums and social media, searching for anything that could support Lucy's case. He knew that without additional evidence or witnesses, standing up to a cop like Samuel would be incredibly challenging. But Alexander wasn't about to give up. While browsing a women's forum, an old post from a few months back caught his attention. It was written by a young woman named Marina, who recounted being abused and physically violated by a police officer in the middle of the street. Although the post didn't name the officer, the description of his behavior, a tall, cold-eyed man with an arrogant attitude, immediately made Alexander think of Samuel. He sent Marina a message, introducing himself and explaining that he was seeking information to fight a similar case. At first, Marina didn't respond. But after a few hours, she replied cautiously. "Who are you? Why do you want to know about this?" Alexander quickly responded, explaining that his wife, Lucy, was also a victim and that they were trying to bring the matter to light. After a brief pause, Marina replied, "If you want to meet, I'll agree. But I'm not sure I can help." The meeting took place in the afternoon at a small Starbucks on the outskirts of the city. Marina was a young woman, around 25 years old, with a pale complexion and wary eyes. She sat in a corner, clutching her coffee cup tightly, her gaze fixed on the entrance. When Alexander walked in, she scrutinized him carefully, as if assessing whether he could be trusted. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Alexander began, trying to keep his tone as friendly as possible. He sat down across from her and placed his briefcase on the table. "I'm not sure if my story will be of any help," Marina said, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "I've tried to forget it, but I can't." Alexander leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Marina, any information you have is important. We're not just doing this for my wife, but for people like you, people who've suffered because of someone like him." Marina was silent for a moment, as if weighing her options. Finally, she took a deep breath and began. "It happened a few months ago. I was walking home from an evening class when a police officer stopped me. He said I matched the description of someone suspected of a robbery nearby." Alexander nodded, taking detailed notes. "Do you remember anything about the officer? His appearance, his voice, anything at all?" "Tall, broad-shouldered, short hair, cold eyes, and an incredibly arrogant attitude." "I remember his badge said Samuel. When I heard your wife's name was Lucy, I guessed it might be the same person." Alexander felt a surge of anger but kept his voice steady. "What happened after that?" "He demanded to search my bag. I told him I didn't have anything suspicious, but he wouldn't listen. Then he said he needed to search me more thoroughly and asked me to step into a secluded area." Marina paused, her hands trembling. Alexander didn't rush her, giving her time to compose herself. "He touched me. He searched my body like I wasn't a person. I tried to resist, but he threatened to arrest me for obstructing a police investigation." Alexander clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. "Marina, did you tell anyone about this? Did you report it?" Marina shook her head, her eyes downcast. "No. Who would believe me? He's a cop, and I'm just a young woman. I was terrified that if I spoke out, he'd hurt me or my family." Alexander felt a wave of anger but kept his tone calm. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Marina. We're building a case against him. If you're willing to testify, we'll do everything we can to protect you." Marina looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't want to see him again. But if this can help others, I'll do it." Alexander gave her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. This isn't an easy decision, but it means so much. We won't let you face him alone." That evening, Alexander told Lucy everything about Marina. Hearing the story, Lucy couldn't hold back her tears. "She's so young. It's horrifying that she had to endure that," Lucy said, her voice breaking. "But it's incredible that she's willing to stand up." "She's very brave," Alexander said. "And there are others out there. I'll keep looking. We need more evidence." Lucy held her husband's hand, feeling a renewed sense of strength. "I'm so grateful for you, Alexander. Not just for helping me, but for fighting for justice." Alexander smiled, but his eyes were filled with determination. "Justice is something everyone deserves. And Samuel will have to face the truth." Alexander didn't stop there. He reached out to another woman named Caroline, a cashier at a large supermarket in New York City. When Alexander met her at a small Starbucks, Caroline looked nervous. She wore a long coat and dark sunglasses, as if afraid of being recognized. "Thank you for coming," Alexander began, trying to create a comfortable atmosphere. "I'm Alexander, Lucy's husband." She was one of Samuel's victims. Hearing that name, Caroline shuddered slightly. He's a monster," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the table. "He humiliated me right in front of the supermarket where I work. But I didn't dare tell anyone. I'm afraid he'll retaliate." Alexander listened to Caroline's story with deep empathy. She recounted how Samuel had stopped her after work, demanding she show her identification because he suspected her of theft. When Caroline couldn't immediately provide her ID, Samuel searched her bag in front of her coworkers and customers. He even touched me, tearing open my blouse, Caroline said, her voice breaking. I couldn't do anything but stand there, feeling like I'd lost all dignity. Alexander nodded, his expression filled with determination. Caroline, I know this is incredibly difficult, but if you're willing to testify alongside Lucy, we can put an end to his abuse of power. Caroline remained silent for a long moment before finally sighing. I don't want to face him, but if this can help others, I'll do it. Meanwhile, Louis was sitting in the patrol car with Samuel. He stole glances at Samuel, who was laughing and chatting casually, as if his actions would never catch up with him. Louis couldn't stop thinking about the victims Samuel had harmed. The image of Clara crying, Lucy being humiliated, and others he had heard about but never met haunted him. Louis, what are you thinking about? Samuel asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Nothing, Louis stammered. You need to loosen up, Samuel said with a mocking tone. This job isn't for the weak. Louis lowered his head, staying silent. But deep down, he knew he couldn't remain quiet any longer. Maybe Alexander and Lucy were the opportunity he needed to stand up and make things right. That evening, Alexander returned home with a list of people he had contacted. I found 3 people willing to testify, he told Lucy, his face showing both exhaustion and hope. Lucy was surprised. Really? They're all victims of Samuel? Yes, Alexander nodded. Each of them has their own story, but all of them involve Samuel. I think this will be strong evidence to hold him accountable. Lucy felt a sense of relief. She knew the road ahead would still be tough, but finding others willing to stand up made her feel less alone. Thank you, Alexander. We're doing this not just for me, but for everyone he's hurt. Alexander took her hand, his eyes full of resolve. Samuel will pay for what he's done. He can't keep abusing his power like this. The next day, Lucy entered the office of the women's rights organization, feeling a mix of nervousness and hope. The organization had scheduled a meeting to hear her story firsthand and verify evidence before launching a legal campaign against Samuel. A woman with short black hair in a navy blue blazer greeted Lucy with a smile. You must be Lucy. I'm Rose, the person you spoke with on the phone. Please, have a seat. Lucy sat down, placing her bag on her lap. Thank you for arranging this meeting. I'm very nervous about filing a complaint, but I know I can't let him continue. Rose nodded, her expression serious. You did the right thing by coming here. But first, I need you to recount the entire incident from the beginning, without leaving out any details. Lucy began her story, her voice trembling but growing steadier as she recounted what had happened. Samuel abused his power not just with me, but with many others. He thinks his uniform will protect him from any consequences. Rose listened attentively, occasionally jotting down key points. Lucy, we've received several similar reports about Samuel from other victims. This isn't the first time he's done this, and it won't be the last if we don't act. Sitting next to Rose was Pablo, a young but experienced lawyer. He adjusted his glasses and carefully reviewed the documents Lucy had provided. Lucy, we'll need testimony from other witnesses to strengthen the case. Have you already contacted anyone? Lucy nodded and handed over Alexander's list. My husband found Marina, Caroline, and Clara. They're all willing to testify, but they're very afraid of Samuel retaliating. Pablo gave her an encouraging smile. That's a great start. We'll protect them. We can also arrange additional legal safeguards for you and the witnesses. Rose turned to Lucy, her expression resolute. But you need to prepare yourself. Samuel won't be easy to confront, and sometimes the system doesn't work in our favor. Are you ready for this? Lucy clenched her hands tightly, her eyes shining with determination. I'm ready. I'm doing this not just for myself, but for everyone he's harmed. The meeting lasted over 2 hours, with detailed plans laid out. Rose promised to file an official lawsuit in court, while Pablo worked on gathering witness statements. On her way home, Lucy felt like she was stepping into a major battle, but for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Alexander was waiting by the door when she arrived. "Are you okay, Lucy?" Alexander asked, his voice full of concern. "Better," she replied, offering a tired smile. "Rose and Pablo are very professional. They've outlined a clear plan." Alexander gently squeezed her hand. "I'll always be here, standing by your side. Samuel will pay for what he's done." The next morning, Pablo visited Marina at her home. Marina, still nervous, had prepared her documents. "Hello, I'm Pablo, a lawyer with the Women's Rights Organization. I'm here to help you prepare your testimony." Marina looked at Pablo, her eyes filled with hesitation. "Do you think we can win?" "Samuel, he's not someone easy to fight." Pablo smiled reassuringly. "We don't need him to be easy to fight. We need the truth, and you have that. Trust me, Marina, every word of your testimony matters." "Thank you for coming," Rose began, her voice calm and reassuring as she sat across from Caroline at their usual Starbucks. Caroline held a piece of paper detailing everything she could remember about the incident. "I don't want him to keep hurting others," Caroline said, her voice steadier than before. "If I have to face him, I will." Rose smiled warmly. "We're here to support you. Don't worry, Caroline. This time, he won't escape." At the police station, Samuel was beginning to feel the tension. The looks from his colleagues were growing stranger, and it seemed like people were whispering about him. Lewis, who had witnessed all of Samuel's abusive behavior, couldn't hide his discomfort. One day, he walked into the break room and saw Raoul, the older colleague who always gave him sound advice. "Raoul, I need your advice," Lewis said in a low voice. Raoul raised an eyebrow. "You're worried about Samuel, aren't you?" Lewis nodded. "I can't keep ignoring it. But if I speak up, my career could be over." Raoul patted Lewis on the shoulder, his tone firm yet empathetic. "Doing the right thing has never been easy. But remember, silence can make you complicit. If you want change, it has to start with you." Raoul's words lingered in Lewis's mind. After much thought, he decided to meet with Rose and provide her with critical information. That evening, Lucy received a call from Rose. "Lucy, we've just received some very important news. Someone from inside the police department wants to work with us." Lucy froze. "Who is it?" "He wants to keep his identity confidential for now, but I believe this will be a turning point in our case," Rose replied. "Stay strong. We're on the right track." Lucy hung up, her heart brimming with hope. Alexander approached her, concern etched on his face. "What's going on?" "Someone inside wants to help us," Lucy said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Then Samuel has no way out now," Alexander affirmed, his gaze sharp. Lucy nodded. "Yes, this time he'll face justice." The next morning, Lucy woke up more determined than ever. She was ready to face any challenge, especially knowing she had an ally within the police force. Alexander sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the list of witnesses they had convinced to testify. "Helen called this morning," Alexander said, setting his coffee cup down. "She's reached out to a journalist from El Progreso. If we handle this right, your story could go public." Lucy's hand trembled slightly with anxiety. "Will it be safe? Samuel won't sit idly by if he finds out." "We'll be careful," Alexander reassured her. "The paper has promised to protect your identity and that of the witnesses until the case officially goes to court." At the law office, Rose and Pablo were preparing for an important meeting with Marina, Caroline, and Clara. The purpose was to consolidate their testimonies, organize the evidence, and prepare for the upcoming trial. Marina arrived first. The young woman still looked nervous, but her eyes no longer showed fear. "I'm ready," she said, placing a stack of written testimony on the table. "I won't let him hurt anyone else." Caroline arrived next, carrying a small handbag. She gave Marina a slight smile, as if to offer strength to the younger woman. "We've all been through this. If we stick together, I believe we can win." Clara, the oldest among them, was the last to arrive. "I've told my children about this," she said, her voice steady and firm. "They support me testifying." Pablo looked at the group, his eyes filled with hope. "Thank you for your courage. With everything we have, I believe Samuel will have nowhere to hide." Rose began the meeting by outlining the next legal steps. "First, we'll file the official lawsuit next week. In the meantime, everyone should prepare for questioning by the defense lawyers." Marina frowned. "Can they ask anything? Even things that aren't relevant?" Rose nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, they can. But remember, their goal is to rattle you and undermine your credibility. Stay focused on the truth and don't let them intimidate you." Meanwhile, at the police station, Louis was wrestling with his conscience. He had decided to meet with Rose to provide information about Samuel, but the fear of being discovered haunted him. Rose walked into the break room, placing a hand on Louis's shoulder. "Are you okay, Louis? You look like you haven't slept in a week." Louis gave a strained smile. "I've been thinking about Samuel, and everything he's done." Rose sat down next to him, his gaze steady. "Louis, if you want to end this, you can't just stand on the sidelines. You have the power to make a difference, but it takes courage." Louis took a deep breath, resolving to do the right thing. He picked up his phone and called Rose. "I want to meet with you. I have important information about Samuel." The meeting between Louis and Rose took place at a small Starbucks in an old neighborhood. Louis, dressed in plain clothes, scanned his surroundings nervously before sitting down. "I'm Louis," he said in a low voice. "I work with Samuel. I've witnessed his abuses of power many times, but..." I stayed silent. Rose offered an encouraging smile. "Thank you for coming. This isn't easy, but it's a very important step." Louis continued, his voice filled with unease. "Samuel has strong ties with some of the higher-ups. That's how he's always managed to escape any consequences. But if necessary, I'm willing to testify to bring him to justice." Rose nodded, quickly jotting down the details Louis provided. "Your information will be a crucial piece in this case. We'll do everything we can to protect you." Before leaving, Louis looked Rose in the eyes. "Make sure justice is served. I can't stand it any longer." The next day, Helen met Lucy at their usual Starbucks. She carried a newspaper, where Lucy's story was featured in detail, though her name had been withheld. "Lucy, have you seen this article?" Helen asked, sliding the newspaper across the table. "They've published it. And it seems like it's spreading fast." Lucy stared at the article, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. "This could help us, but it will also make Samuel furious." Helen smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry. Alexander said the women's rights organizations are backing you. We have strong allies." Lucy nodded, her eyes glimmering with determination. "I'm not afraid of him. I just want justice to be done." At the police station, Samuel held the newspaper in his hand, his face flushed with anger. "They dare to do this to me. Who's behind this?" he yelled, slamming the paper onto his desk. Louis stood silently in the corner, watching. For the first time, he didn't feel afraid of Samuel. Instead, he felt a sense of relief knowing he had done the right thing. That afternoon, Pablo called Lucy with an important update. "Lucy, we've officially filed the lawsuit with the court. The first hearing will be in 2 weeks. Lucy exhaled deeply, though her worry was still evident. "Thank you, Pablo. Do we stand a chance of winning?" "With what we have, I believe justice will prevail," Pablo assured her. Lucy felt a renewed sense of hope. This time, she knew she wasn't alone. 2 weeks later, the day of the trial finally arrived. Lucy stepped into the courtroom, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. But beside her was Alexander, holding her hand tightly, giving her strength. Across the room, Samuel sat with a cold expression, occasionally casting mocking glances at Lucy. Pablo and Rose stood at the front, meticulously prepared with every document and piece of evidence. Marina, Caroline, and Clara were also present, each seated in separate corners, their faces showing a mix of resolve and apprehension. Louis, whom Lucy had never met in person, entered through a side door. He nodded to Rose and sat in the front row, avoiding Samuel's gaze. The hearing began with the judge's declaration. This case involves allegations of abuse of power and inappropriate behavior by Officer Samuel Martinez. The court will hear testimony from both sides before reaching a verdict. Pablo stood, his gaze firm, and began his opening statement. "Your Honor, today we will demonstrate that the defendant used his authority to violate the privacy and dignity of multiple victims. We have testimony from witnesses and evidence to substantiate these claims." Samuel's lawyer smirked. "We will prove that these accusations are baseless and lack clear legal grounds. My client was simply performing his duties as an officer." Lucy sat silently, her hands clasped tightly together. She knew this trial wouldn't be easy. Marina was the first to be called to the witness stand. The young woman took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she held the microphone. "That day, I was walking home from class when Samuel stopped me. He searched my bag, forced me into a secluded area, and violated my dignity." Samuel's lawyer stood, smirking. "You claim to have been violated, but do you have any evidence to prove this? Or is this just your word against his?" Marina's cheeks flushed, but she stood her ground. "I don't have video or photos, but I'm not lying. He threatened to arrest me if I resisted." Rose interjected, rising to her feet. "Your Honor, this witness is not an isolated case. We will present similar testimonies from other victims to prove this was not a random occurrence." Next was Caroline. She walked to the stand, her eyes resolute though her voice wavered with emotion. "He humiliated me right outside the supermarket where I work. He grabbed my bag, spilled my belongings on the ground, and even tore my blouse in front of everyone." Samuel's lawyer approached her with a cold expression. "Mrs. Caroline, are you exaggerating your story to tarnish my client's reputation? Do you have any personal motive against Samuel Martinez?" Caroline looked him straight in the eye. "I have no motive other than the truth. He hurt me, and I don't want anyone else to suffer the same." The most shocking testimony came from Louis. When he stepped onto the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Louis didn't look at Samuel, instead, he directed his attention to the judge. "I'm a colleague of Samuel. I've witnessed him abusing his power on numerous occasions, targeting those he deemed weak. I stayed silent for too long, and I can't continue anymore." Samuel narrowed his eyes, his glare piercing toward Louis as if trying to intimidate him. But Louis remained steadfast. He always believed his uniform would shield him from accountability. But the truth is, he crossed every line. Samuel's lawyer quickly stood to counter. "Louis, do you have any personal grievances against Samuel? Are you fabricating these claims out of jealousy or resentment?" Louis shook his head, his voice firm. "I'm not jealous. I'm just doing what's right. My silence was my greatest mistake, and I'm correcting it now." After the witnesses presented their testimonies, Rose submitted additional documents, including a list of prior complaints against Samuel that had been dismissed. Pablo stood up and emphasized, "This is a pattern of systemic abuse of power. With all the evidence and testimonies, we believe the court will see the severity of this issue. The closing arguments were tense. Samuel's lawyer attempted to blame the victims, claiming they were only trying to tarnish his client's reputation. But Rose and Pablo stood their ground. The judge reviewed all the documents and witness testimonies before finally declaring, after considering all the evidence and statements, the court finds sufficient grounds to prosecute the defendant, Samuel Martinez, for abuse of power and violation of personal rights. A subsequent trial will determine the appropriate sentence. Lucy exhaled deeply, tears streaming down her face. Alexander squeezed her hand, smiling gently. "We've taken the first step." As they left the courtroom, Marina, Caroline, and Clara approached Lucy. Marina took her hand. "Thank you, Lucy. Without you, I would never have dared to come forward." Lucy smiled, her voice choked with emotion. "We did this together. This is a victory for all of us." Louis walked over and nodded respectfully at Lucy. "I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner." Lucy looked at him, her gaze full of gratitude. "You've done the right thing. That's what matters." That evening, Lucy and Alexander returned home. She sat at her desk, looking at the notes she had written over the past weeks. Alexander walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Samuel will be held accountable. You've made a difference." Lucy looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Yes, not just for me, but for everyone he's hurt." The final day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed, and all eyes were on Samuel. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. He opened the case file, his expression stern as he read the verdict aloud. After thoroughly reviewing the evidence and testimonies, the court concludes that the defendant, Samuel Martinez, has committed severe violations of human rights, abused his position of power, and degraded the dignity of others. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison and permanently barred from serving in law enforcement. The courtroom erupted in sighs of relief, and a few people shed tears of joy. Lucy looked at Samuel, her gaze resolute. He hung his head, the arrogance he once displayed now gone. Alexander squeezed her hand tightly and whispered, "We've won." Rose approached them with a smile. "You did it, Lucy. Justice has been served." Outside the courthouse, Marina, Caroline, and Clara hugged Lucy tightly. Marina, her voice trembling, said, "We're not afraid anymore." Lucy smiled through her tears. "This is a victory for all of us." Lucy's story and the stories of the other victims remind us that justice does not come naturally. It requires courage, perseverance, and unity. Despite Samuel's abuse of power, Lucy's determination and the support of the community brought him to justice. It serves as a powerful reminder that silence in the face of injustice is complicity in wrongdoing. When people stand up and take action, even the most powerful perpetrators cannot escape accountability. The strength of courage and truth always prevails.